campus, and we do see a lot of things involving bicycles and cyclists. So just quickly, I just wanted to let everybody know that theft is the #1 crime on campus, and of course, bike theft falls within that. So unfortunately, we do see a number of bicycle thefts occur on campus. So the takeaway that I want you to get from me of anything is to always use a U-lock instead of a cable lock. And this is an example of a cable lock that was cut on campus and the bicycle stolen. So we recognize that U-locks are kind of inconvenient for carrying and also are more costly. But depending on how much you value your bike and the cost of your bike, if it potentially would be a target, it will easily be cut if it's a cable lock. So invest in this. I do have a brochure over here that kind of shows you the best locking technique for your bicycle as to how to secure it. So they recommend using a U-lock to secure your bicycle from the frame to the bicycle rack. And then if you do have a cable lock, it's a good idea to put the cable lock through the U-lock and attach that rear wheel as well. Just to make sure we do have wheels get stolen. We have seats that get stolen. We get saddlebags, lights. If you have a $25 bicycle light, I know, again, it's really inconvenient, but maybe take that with you when you do park your bicycle on campus. But also know that we do have secure bicycle compounds on campus that you can connect with parking services. And there is a rental charge each term. It's $30 a term. But what that means, it is a secure compound. I don't like the word compound, but it's a very secure area that you have to swipe your campus card to get in and to get out. And so what that means is that only those who have access, who have paid for that access on their campus card, can gain access to there. We still encourage folks to secure your bicycle when you are putting your bike in there. However, I have been with campus safety for 13 plus years now and have never taken a bike theft report from one of the compounds. So it is secure, it's camera monitored. And like I said, we have a record of everyone going in and out. Piggybacking, of course, has happened, but there's few enough people using those compounds that it's not like you have this crowd of people coming in behind you. And again, they should be swiping out to be able to get out as well. So there is one by athletics. They've been conveniently, hopefully, located around campus for access. There's one by athletics. There's one by Turanga Commons, and the newest one and the nicest looking one is over by Denton Tower at the base there. So if you are interested in investing in that too, just contact parking services and they can get you set up with that. I will leave some of our campus safety brochures, again, that locking technique there and a few other tips. And then I have these reflective, they're actually bag tags, but I'm not sure if it's going to be part of the presentation, but of course, safe cycling on campus too, making sure that you're visible to vehicles, knowing that we don't have bike paths throughout the entire campus. So if you want to add an extra reflective thing on your backpack, you're welcome to take these two and use them, or again, leave them behind. And that's all I had to say. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And now on to extending your cycling season. So this is going to focus mainly on winter cycling, mostly because the difference between summer and fall isn't quite as much as the difference between summer and winter. But I do have a few little tips about fall in there, just in case. So we'll start with just the land acknowledgement. So I work for EnviroCentre, and at EnviroCentre we do acknowledge that the land where we live. Oh goodness, is it going automatically? I'm sorry. No, I was not supposed to do this. Oh, jeez. I don't know how to fix it right now. We start from the beginning or exit the slideshow. I might need to exit my slideshow for just a half second to figure this one out. No, don't use timings. Hoping that this will work. Transitions on mouse click. And there is another thing to push somewhere. I did this all for like another presentation, and now it's all ruined. I'm very sorry. I will continue to read. I'll just finish the land acknowledgements. So we acknowledge that the land where we live, gather, and work is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Since time immemorial, the Algonquin peoples have lived here. We are proud and grateful to call it our home, and we endeavor to work respectfully with the land and its people. And as one of our directors notes, Ottawa is a river city, which does make it challenging to navigate even at the best of times. And it does certainly play a role in getting around during the winter as well. How did I do this last time, Phil?
From current slide, let's just stop.
Just try and figure this one out. So this is me. I've been winter cycling in Ottawa for the past 11 years. Cycling in Ottawa for the past 11 years, and this is going to be my 8th winter cycling. It's going to be slightly limited because of medical reasons. For those of you who can't see me on camera, I am fairly heavily pregnant, which will limit to a certain extent the amount of time that I can be biking this winter. Hopefully not too much, but you know, medical practitioners suggest not riding a bike for about 6 weeks after giving birth. So I'm good up until that point, and then I have to wait for a little bit. But I do have 2 cargo bikes, and I use them to get around throughout the whole year. And so this is a little bit of a different winter cycling presentation from what other cycling presentations generally are, which are often presented by fairly able-bodied, youngish white men. I'm not coming from that perspective. So you're going to have some different tips in this presentation than in those presentations. It's not to say that one or other is better. It's just that we're coming at the aspect from very different angles. So yeah, we do work with EnviroCentre, my colleague Phil and I. And at EnviroCentre, we care an awful lot about cycling because it is a huge, incredible way to reduce our environmental impact. So at EnviroCentre, the mission is to provide people, communities, and organizations with those practical solutions to lighten environmental impact in lasting ways. And in Ottawa, the on-road transportation, especially from cars, makes up over a quarter of our emissions as a city. So it's a huge portion that can be really nicely tackled by a few simple switches. It could be transit, it could be carpooling, but cycling is a really nice way of doing that. So today we're going to cover a few different aspects. We're going to talk a bit about the benefits of cycling throughout the whole year. Something about the skills and tips for planning, how to pick a bike, and then how to maintain that bike, because that is definitely a big challenge. So starting with fall. So fall is a little bit of everything. We get the nice days, we get the snow, we get the rain, we get the wind. But generally speaking, fall is not a huge transition from summer, except for the temperature and the amount of precipitation. So it does get very rainy, it can get windy, it gets a little bit cooler, and it gets darker. So the things really to keep in mind for fall, want to make sure that you're bringing your raincoat, throw a little poncho into your bag, even if you don't think you're going to need it, you might. You're probably going to be biking into a headwind at some point. So, extra leg day on that day. Or it might be a consideration to get an e-bike if you're concerned about that the extra wind. And beware of piles of wet leaves. So they can be surprisingly slippery to the extent that the techniques over wet leaves can be very similar to the techniques over snow. So just slow down, take it cautiously, and navigate around any big piles whenever you safely can. And because it's darker, now is when you want to make sure that you have those lights. So the previous, I completely missed her name, but the focus on security was talking about taking lights off your bike. We're going to talk a little bit about some options for lights that can stay on your bike because they are fully bolted down and are a pain in the butt to remove. But you can get cheap lights in plentiful quantities just in case they get stolen. You can also get reusable lights, rechargeable lights, but make sure those lights are on there. And then we move into winter, and this is where we talk about how it's not actually so bad, really, promise. Plenty of people really enjoy getting out in the winter for going skating, skiing, throwing snowballs. You can fit cycling into part of that as well, part of that enjoyment. So we do get about 12 days per year where the precipitation is over 5 centimeters of snowfall that actually lands and stays. Those days are going to be harder. They're also going to be harder to drive in. They're also going to be harder to walk in. So that's harder across the board. We also have about 115 days where there's at least 1 centimeter of snow that is on the ground, but it's not necessarily on the roads. So there are plenty of days where the roads are actually very clear, but many of your pathways are not going to be cleared. So that's where that route planning comes into play, and we will talk about that. In terms of average daytime highs, it's about -4, which is really a very nice temperature to be out, especially doing some activity. You never get too hot that you're sweating. I find that quite frequently I'm at light, sort of blowing the hot air out of my coat, taking off gloves, taking off hats, taking off scarves, sometimes taking off my whole coat, because you do get so warm while riding, but because the temperature is a little bit lower, you never get past that sort of uncomfortable, sweaty, yucky point. So it's really quite comfortable and really nice. So biking year-round does have several benefits. Generally speaking, people who bike for commuting enjoy their commute more than people who take transit or drive. It is fantastic exercise. For many people, it can be the most convenient option. Not for everyone. For most people, it saves money versus some of the other alternatives. Definitely great for the environment. And one of the things that I really like is that it makes for vibrant streets. You start recognizing people out and about who are riding through the year because there's not that many of us. And it makes for a little bit of a community, a sense of belonging. And you start to get to know your neighbors a little bit more, which is not something that happens necessarily on other modes of transportation. Okay, now we're getting to some of the bigger questions that people are asking about. How do I do this? Like, that's great, you have all of the positive stuff, but how do I actually do this? So choosing the right bike is fairly important. I'm not going to put all of the emphasis on this because I rode for 2 years on the crummiest secondhand bikes that I could find that fit a set of winter tires. And then I just tossed the bike at the end of the year because it was completely rusted through. So you can go that route, find a really, really cheap bike that fits a set of winter tires, and then just donate the whole thing back. So that's choosing a used bike. You can also go for one that it will last a few more years and you're going to spend a bit more money maintaining. In which case you definitely want it to be comfortable. You're going to be on that bike for longer than you would during the summer over the same distance. It is a little bit more work and a little bit slower. Generally speaking, aluminum wheels will work better. They don't rust as easily, and they're a little bit more sturdy. Flat pedals instead of clip-in pedals. I know people who ride through the winter on their clips, and that's great. But for most of us, the slip and slide, it's a little bit scary. Flat pedals mean that you can just take your foot off. It also means you can wear your regular winter boots, which is quite nice. Fenders, it gets so slushy, it's so sloppy that without having a fender in the front, you're going to get a face full of salty slush. And without having a fender in the back means you're going to get that nice little line up your back of brown. And it doesn't seem to matter how cold it is outside, that the stuff on the roads will still be brown and goopy and flying into your face. So fenders or mud guards, very, very key. And if you want to spend a little bit more, you can go for a fat bike. They do provide better traction over those deeper snow days. So there are certain days where really the fat bikes are the only people moving anywhere, people who own the fat bikes. If you do want to spend that extra money, there are some fancier little upgrades that you can look for. So internal gear hubs is where you don't have your gears on the outside. They're actually all built into the rear wheel of the bike, which means there is nothing external that can get that salt water in to corrode. Makes for changing gears much more easily. At a certain point around -30, if you have external gears, you're going to find that your gears stop changing because it's too cold. If you have internal gears, it's not a problem. Full chain guards or a belt drive means that your chain is not exposed, so it's not getting rusty. Dynamo lights, when the lights are all built into the actual bike. These can be magnetic. They can also work off the motion of the wheel. So you can buy them aftermarket, or you can buy bikes with them already built in. And that means that you never have to worry about your bike lights. Again, you don't have to remember them. They're not going to be stolen. They're physically on the bike. Studded tires, I do wish I had a studded tire with me so I could actually show you. But these are essentially just regular looking tires, except for they have metal studs embedded into the rubber all the way around. And the studs will grip into ice. And most winter cyclists will have a story or two of riding perfectly fine over sheer glare ice. And then the second you come to a stop at a stop sign and put your foot down, you're out. So the studs are fabulous over ice. Some people prefer not to have them because they do increase the drag, and so they'll just choose to not ride on those icier days. Personally, I find that they're absolutely worth it, and they've kept me upright many a time. And then pogies are these little guys here. So they're also known as bar mitts, and they go over your handlebars, which means that all of the gears and the brakes are covered by fluffy, warm, waterproof shell. And with a set of pogies on your bike, you really only need a very thin pair of mittens, and your hands are going to be very, very warm. And you can get these in a bunch of different colors. Unfortunately, in North America, mostly black. But different materials, different brands, they become much more popular in recent years. But definitely worth it if you're wanting that investment and if your hands get very, very cold. You can also get little seat covers like this. And this one is made out of sheepskin, but you can make them out of old sweaters. There's also knitting patterns for them on Ravelry. So there's lots of different ways to get a seat cover. And again, this just keeps your bum a little bit warm, a little bit more comfortable. It's not a huge expense, but definitely worth it. Lights, absolutely key. You can have all of the reflective gear that you want, but legally required front light in white on steady. So not flashing, steady when it's at night. And the rear light must be red, and it can flash, but you can also keep it on steady. Having it on steady does mean that you're actually more visible. It seems counterintuitive because a flashing light you'd think would be more visible, but it has more of like a disco ball type effect where you sort of become invisible for portions of the time, and it's really hard to judge movement and speed. So at least one of your front lights needs to be steady. And you need to have it on your bike by law between 30 minutes before sunset, 30 minutes after sunrise. There are other ways to be visible, however. And this is one of my favorite. These are strings of bike lights. Not bike lights, sorry. These are strings of Christmas lights that you can get from Canadian Tire. And you just wrap them around your bike. They come in a bunch of different colors, and you can attach them with winter grade zip ties. Emphasis on winter grades because the regular zip ties will fall off past -10. Ask me how I know. And they can flash, they can twinkle. This one actually doesn't flash or twinkle, but some of them do. And that's just a really nice way to stay a little bit more visible. It's really cheery, especially around the Christmas season. It is in addition to the white light and the red light. So it's not instead of, in addition to. So there's nothing stopping you from putting other lights on your bike as long as you have that front cover. We do also have a note here about brighter isn't always better, because it's not helpful to be seen if you're actually blinding other road users. So you want to be visible, but not blinding. The other question we get a lot is what to wear. And our answer is, what would you wear to go out for a walk? What would you wear to go out for a skate on the canal or go for a cross-country ski? because chances are that's going to be the clothing that you'll want to be dressing in. So there's probably already some stuff in your wardrobe that will work perfectly fine. You're going to warm up, so dress a little bit cooler to start off with. As I mentioned, lots of layers. You can start taking it off as you go along. And you're going to get a little bit mucky because there's lots of salt and slush. So I choose personally to go for a nice, beautiful winter coat that I get dry cleaned once a year because it gets filthy. Other people prefer to have more athletic looking gear that they can easily just rinse off in the sink. But yeah, just make sure that all of your extremities are going to be as warm as they would be if you were going cross country skiing, and you'll probably be set. Sunglasses and goggles are really useful. A lot of people choose goggles and will choose to wear a ski helmet or a snowboard helmet because they fit nicely underneath. And that's a really nice combination. It's really comfortable. It keeps the wind off your eyes, and you can choose tinted for daytime or clear for nighttime for the goggles. Just be a little bit like aware that ski and snowboard helmets are not rated for use on the roads. So their crash protection is slightly different. They're rated for crashes in snow or against trees, which have a little bit more cush. My personal choice is I do actually go for a ski helmet, but I'm also riding bikes at a speed and a style where I'm very unlikely to fall off them in the first place. So I'm making that balanced decision. Whatever is going to work better for you and your personal riding style is going to be the right option. We carry things. It sounds like a strange question because mostly it's, you just carry things the way that you would normally carry things. It's not quite so straightforward. For the most part, you want to keep your weight on the rear wheel, not the front wheel. So a rear basket is going to be a better choice over the front basket. That's because the rear wheel is where the traction is, and if your rear wheel starts sliding out, you're probably going to be able to save it. Whereas if your front wheel starts sliding out, especially if there's a lot of weight over the front wheel, it's very difficult to save that in a sliding situation. So as much as possible, weight on the rear wheel. Baskets are really useful because they're just there to catch your mittens and your scarf and whatever you happen to be taking off. And backpacks are even less advised in the winter than in the summer. So that's again because your center of gravity is so much higher. So trying to bring it down over that rear wheel will help keep you upright. And if you don't have a basket on the rear, and you sort of want somewhere to put your backpack, any milk crate basket from any store, get those winter zip ties. You can just zip tie it to a rear pannier rack, and you can get those rear pannier racks for super cheap at Recycles over on Catherine Street. Okay. Slight diversion at this point, which is winter biking with kids. This is not specifically commuter related, but who knows? There might be a kid drop off on the way. Winter is an amazing time to be out with your kids doing any sort of activity because it really does help them get in touch with what we have as seasons here. So whether it's skiing, skating, cycling, getting kids out during the winter is a great option. But also, it's a great time to teach your kids how to ride a bike because they are covered in protective equipment in the form of their snowsuits. They are more likely to fall into a snowbank. Just a really good time to get kids onto bikes. If you are looking to transport children, longtail, which is this one right here, so where the back is extended to provide more seating area, and trailer style bikes work a little bit better in the snow than a front loader bike with two wheels. And that is because more of the weight is over that front wheel in those front loader two-wheeled bikes. Tricycles are fabulous because they have a much better balance point. But yeah, trailers work really well, nice and covered, or you can put a seat on your bike as well. When you are out and about, lane position is going to be a little bit different because part of the bike lane is going to be covered in snow. So the legal requirement in Ontario is to ride as close to the edge as practicable, roughly interpreted as 1 meter from the edge of the road. If that edge of the road is covered by snow, pothole, puddle, your 1 meter moves into the road further. So 1 meter from that edge that you could possibly safely ride on. This does mean that sometimes being in the middle of the lane is the safest road positioning, which is not always comfortable for everyone, perfectly understandable, but it is the advised position if you can't be further to the right safely. Be a little bit aware around those puddles. There might be a pothole in them and you don't know until you're on it. You don't always know how deep the puddle is. You don't know if there's ice under the top level of water. So skirting around the puddle is definitely going to be your better option. And what I do sometimes is instead of just going and merging with the traffic, I'll sometimes stop, wait for break in traffic, and then go. So that's my personal safety threshold. Again, other people's is going to be different. And certainly which roads you're riding on is going to be different as well, potentially depending on your safety threshold. As always, whether it's summer, winter, fall, whatever, ride in a predictable manner. Make sure other people can guess what you might be doing out of caution for yourself, and that also influences that road positioning a little bit further to the middle of the road. If you're riding towards the middle of the road, but in a predictable way, that's going to be safer for you, and other people will be able to adapt accordingly versus if you're going in and out all the time. Once the snow starts falling, it gets a little bit more challenging. Having those winter tires on your bike is going to be a great first start because you don't have to worry quite so much about ice. But still have to worry a little bit about snow. Winter tires with the studs doesn't help so much with the snow. So slow braking, gentle braking, braking before you need to actually come to a stop. And taking turns really carefully. So in the winter, I actually change up my way of turning a corner. So in the summer, I lean into the turns, which most people do. In the winter, my handlebars turn. I'm staying as upright as I can. I turn the handlebars and then the bike follows the rest the back of the bike follows the front of the bike in that case, which means I'm having as much of that tire contact with the ground as possible. Downshifting, so going into an easier gear, will mean starting is easier. It'll mean getting over snow is easier. And as much as possible, you put your bum on the seat so that as much of that weight is on the rear tire, because again, that rear tire can start slipping in the ice. But that's your motor. That rear tire is your motor. So you need to make sure that you have lots of weight over the rear seat. And so downshifting into a lower gear will help keep you seated as opposed to sort of raise up in your seat slightly to push the pedals. And it is always okay to get off and walk. It's not always enjoyable to get off and walk, but it's not a failure either. Sometimes it's just not going to be comfortable to ride through certain patches. And I don't know a single winter cyclist who has not gotten to a point and said, nope, I will get off here, walk a little bit. It's a little bit nicer over there, and then we'll keep going. The other option is to just bike on the beautiful days. There are days where it looks like this, where it's beautifully cleared, no ice or snow on the ground, and it feels almost like riding in spring. It's a little bit cool, but it's perfectly clear. And that's absolutely valid as well. You also don't need to bike everywhere. There's going to be places where you can't, and that's fine. And then there's going to be places where you can. And if you can make those trips, change it from a car to a bike trip, that's going to already make a huge difference in terms of your environmental impact and sort of feel well-being during the winter. You know, getting out and about for those trips when you can. Another really nice tip is to not bike the whole distance if you don't have to. So if you have a bike that can fit on rack and roll, those rack and rolls are now available on all buses all year round. So you shouldn't have to be thinking about whether or not you can actually put your bike on a bus, because they all should be able to accommodate it now. So biking partway to a bus stop, taking the bus a chunk of your way, and then biking afterwards is a great option. And what I like to do is take the LRT when it's running. I take the LRT part of the way. So I live near Herdman, and I sometimes go out to Westboro. So I bike with my daughter to Herdman. We hang out on the train for 5 or 6 stops, and then we bike to where we need to go from the other side. It cuts down the amount of biking by about 9 kilometers in probably 30 minutes, which on a cold day is fairly substantial, but we're still getting out and getting that fresh air and having that time together. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. And all of the LRT stops do have pathways to and from them. So they might not extend very far, but they do have pathways to and from them. And the newer ones have lovely elevators that you can put your bike in to get up to the main platforms. Okay, this is the big one, maintenance. The second big one, the other one's replanning. Have to do it. The second biggest one is the maintenance. How do I keep my bike from becoming a giant rusty bucket of uselessness? And your first option, as I mentioned earlier, is to not, and to just get a different secondhand bike every year, and assume that it will become a giant rusty bucket of uselessness. If you don't want to do that, you can put a little bit more effort in. You want to make sure that all of your bits on your bike are functioning before you head out the door. So you don't find partway through that something's broken or not working. You do want to also make sure that you're clearing off as much snow and ice and muck as possible after every ride. Sometimes that's just like banging your bike up and down or giving it a little kick. And sometimes it's going to take a little bit more than that. So cloth, toothbrush, degreaser, and then always reapply lube every time you do that. In the winter, wet lube over dry lube every time. It's much messier to apply, but will last a little bit longer in the winter and will do much better job. The other one is to try and store your bike in a cooler area. So if you have a covered area outside or an unheated garage, those are great places to store your bike, because it stops that freeze thaw. So once the snow is on, it just kind of keeps the snow on it rather than turning it into water. And it's once it becomes water and the salt in the water starts seeping into different cracks, that's when you start getting the rust. So here we have a couple of examples. So this is a fairly, for winter, fairly clean, to be perfectly honest. Fairly lubey external gear. So with something like this, you want to make sure that there's no snow buildup. Probably clean it once to twice a month, unless you're me, in which case it's like I clean it when I need it. And then I regret not cleaning it more frequently, but make sure you're getting lots of wet lube into all of those parts. It's really easy to apply wet lube. You just take the bottle and like squeeze it all over and run your chain through and just get it all goopy. And then here we have some snow on a tire with a fender. Fenders are absolutely fantastic, except on the really snowy days, because they will get full of snow. So you need to actually knock some of the snow out from underneath the fender on those days, because you're actually going to find that there's some resistance on the wheel. Route planning.
Yeah, that's sorry, after breath, but I'm almost okay.
People just
Okay, that's true. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, there's a question.
Yeah, say, are there any fenders that have brushes built into them? So like,
There's no fenders with brushes built into them, but you can get mud guards instead of fenders, and they tend to have a little bit more clearance. So that would avoid the challenge of getting snow stuck in. honestly, you can make a mud guard out of like a milk bottle. There are tutorials online of how to do that, or like a juice jug. But they're usually flatter pieces of plastic that rest sort of over top of the wheel, like up here. And then you're not getting that particular challenge now. Okay, route planning. We are quite blessed in Ottawa, especially central Ottawa, to have over 40 kilometers of officially winter cleared cycling network. But there are lots of other paths and kilometers of roadway that are cleared for pedestrian use, but they are actually multi-use paths. So they're not part of the winter cycling network, but you can cycle on them. I will show you two different maps that show both of those options. This is from last year. I'm assuming that it will be the same clearing standard as this year. So winter bike routes are cleared once there's 2.5 centimeters of snow resting on the ground, and the clearing standard is to have it cleared within, or starting clearing within 4 hours, which is pretty good, to be honest, where it's the next chunk after like highways and major routes. The ideal is to try and get as many people being able to cycle as often as possible, as opposed to defaulting to cars. Quiet streets, residential streets are generally a little bit nicer, calmer to bike on, but they're not cleared as quickly. So sometimes what I have to do is I have to walk my bike to the closer, busier road before I can start actually riding it on the very snowy days. And some of our pathways are groomed for cross-country skiing. But if you have a fat bike, you can probably still ride on it. So if you're on the Ottawa River Parkway, it's the Kitchissippi Parkway. There's one out east in Orleans. There's one along Overbrook area, around Herdman. If you're on any of those pathways, you can probably ride your fat bike, but other thinner tired bikes would be a little bit more complicated. Yeah. So there's a bunch of available resources. We have the Ottawa cycling map, or the winter cycling map, which is on Geo Ottawa. It's one of several resources available on Geo Ottawa. The better resource for winter cycling is actually the Bike Ottawa winter maps. And I'll show both of those so you can see the difference. You can also ask colleagues, neighbors, or the hashtag #OttBike on any social media channel will help get people out who are in the know of that particular subject. And generally speaking, my experience with social media asking questions is that very few people will see a question as dumb and are mostly really excited to have people who are interested. So if anything, we'll get too much advice rather than not enough. In terms of picking your route, planning ahead, test riding it during the off hours when you don't actually need to be riding it, and leaving a little bit early the first couple of times just in case, and leaving a little bit early on the days when it's a little bit snowier, and bearing in mind that your route is possibly going to be slightly different from other seasons, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a route available. But here are the two route planning options. This one is Geo Ottawa's. So this is Winter Cycling Network officially. So these are the routes that are planned just for winter cycling. And this one is the routes that are available to winter cyclists. So there, you notice that there's a little bit of a difference here. So this is Bike Ottawa maps. Every year, a bunch of volunteers go in and indicate whether a route is being cleared or not based on what they're seeing. And so it updates fairly regularly. And what this indicates is that there are a number of pathways in Ottawa that are being cleared for pedestrians. For example, around Herdman, there's a large number of pathways that are cleared for pedestrian use and access, but they're multi-use paths. You can totally bike on them. And so this map provides both together. And this one, when you combine this with residential streets in the area, it provides one of the most comprehensive route planning options for winter riding. And this is an example of what our winter network looks like the day after a 30-centimeter snowstorm. So I was actually stunned, which is one of the reasons why I took so many photos of every single route. So I'll just point out which they are. The far left, that's Adawi Bridge. The next one over is O'Connor. Then we've got Main Street, I believe. This one here, the 1 second from the right, is the pathway behind Lee's along the river that connects between Lee Station and Main Street. This pathway along the river there. And then I think I can't even remember where that other one is. Essentially, they're all part of the winter network, and they were all cleared bright and early. This was like 9 a.m. So workplaces and businesses can support winter cycling, and us as residents can help influence workplaces and businesses to support winter cycling. So doing things like clearing snow from the bike racks, even if no one is biking and parking there, just the act of clearing the snow away from the racks indicates that you recognize that somebody might. And in the context of sort of the grand scheme of things, for most businesses, it's not a huge additional outpouring of labor because they're already probably clearing somewhere around there. If you have employees who are biking in, providing a space to hang all of the mucky gear or to have a nice warm shower once they've arrived, and encouraging it as part of sort of healthy commuting choice. And then as users of businesses or not necessarily employees or people who have the power, we can use our voices to advocate for the safe cleared routes for both employees and customers to get to those businesses. And so you can write to your councillor, you can write to the mayor, write to people who would have the control over that clearing. If it's a private development, and just say, hey, I noticed that you're not sort of clearing this section. I was wondering why that might be. It would be useful even if I was walking, things like that. And just raise it as an issue because it's the sort of thing that people don't necessarily think about until someone's actually mentioned it. And once it's been mentioned, sort of occasionally you will find that things change just from mentioning it once or twice. As you can see, this is Loblaws. Loblaws does actually a great job of clearing their winter racks, and we're rarely the only people using it. So there's pros and cons for using big chains, but in this case, they do quite a good job of clearing their rack areas. And if you want to learn more, we have an extremely comprehensive guide on EnviroCentre's website. So this is like the long version of what we talked about today. But you can always have those chats with your friends, family, colleagues. You can reach out to EnviroCentre directly. Our transport@EnviroCentre email gets eventually to me. Any of those silly questions, we're very happy to answer because it's probably not a silly question in the first place. You just have to ask. And thank you very much. We have some time for Q&A. If there are any cues. Yes.
We do have one online.
Yes.
Asking if we know if the new Chief Commander Bridge is going to be cleared in the winter.
I do know. Unfortunately, it's not. There's a good reason though. So the bridges that are being cleared in the winter, generally speaking, are connecting on both sides to existing winter cleared pathways. The Chief Commander Bridge connects on both sides to pathways that are not cleared in the winter and that are actually maintained for cross-country skiing. So my belief and understanding and what I know that the groomers want to do is they want to plow it for cross-country skiing, which would mean it would be an option if you have a fat bike, but not necessarily a regular thinner type of bike. So it's not like 100% of a great answer, but I don't think the plan is to just leave it. But so if they're maintaining it for cross-country skiing, it still makes it an option for some people, which would be cool.
Do you know if the new train stations have secure bike parking app?
There are four OC transfer stations around the city that have secure bike parking. You have to pay for it. It's called Ride Secure. Is it Ride Secure? Okay. So look that up. I know that there's one at Saint Laurent, and I know that there's a couple that are sort of further out. All of the O train stations have bike parking, most of which is covered in some way, but it's not secure, unfortunately. I think they found that their Ride Secure pilot didn't go over so popularly, but the fact that they were charging for it and not for parking, I think might have had an impact. I'm not sure.
Take a bike on the train,
You can take a bike on the train.
but obviously when it finally gets up running in the university,
So be very busy. It's gonna be very busy.
And it's limited.
Yes.
You can expect that someone using the train as the last mile, but also
Yes.
cycling to the station. Secure station element.
Yeah, so again, you can lock your bike at the stations, and that's where the tips about how to lock your bike safely come into play. So making sure that everything's bolted down. You can bolt down wheels that would normally be able to come off. You can bolt down a seat post that would normally be able to come off. Lights that are either bolted onto the bike or that you can take with you, and then using those really good locks. Winter bikes are generally, if you're getting the cheaper end of the winter bike, they're generally less likely to be stolen as well because they don't look so great partway through the year. But then you can sort of do the last mile. As I say, they are covered, which is nice. At most stations, there's covered bike parking, and they do clear it as well. Yeah. Any other questions? No. Any other questions online?
Online, just have a comment saying this was a very helpful session and it makes first time winter riding feel much more approachable.
Hey, that's what we're here for. Another question, yes.
It's already a question, but just sort of a plug really. So we do have the employee loan program at Carleton, which means that you can get a loan for bikes.
Okay.
Originally it was just for IT and computing, but now it's extended to include bikes. And also e-bikes are part of that as well. So I think it's up to 4,000.
I think it's 5,000 and it will include safety equipment for it too. So if you want like any bags or anything. I recently purchased an e-bike over the summer using it and it's
That's a big incentive. So I don't know if they heard that online, but it was just to mention that the employee loan program that used to be only available for computer equipment and such can now be used to purchase a bike. That's up to $5,000.
$5,000 and includes related bike safety equipment as well, with bags or stuff like that. It doesn't include clothing, but
you could throw in accessories.
It includes. You can get your lights, your locks.
That's absolutely amazing.
Now there is the cost, this is a way to overcome that a little bit. And
Absolutely.
You buy also something that's perhaps winter appropriate.
Absolutely. So I have two bikes that are winter appropriate. I'm just going to scooch back so I can show you the main one. So the one that's here is one of mine, and I bought it because it was great for winter. It has internal gears, it has dynamo lights, it has a chain that I could put a full chain guard on it. It was upright, it was a step-through frame, it was just everything that I needed in a bike. And that was about $3,000 after tax. And shipping and everything like that. And I've had it for 3 years now, so absolutely worth it for me. But being able to have access to a loan would have made that decision even easier, I think. And so I got this one after several years of having much cheaper bikes that I had to replace large portions of the stuff or the components on because they rusted through, or I just did the sort of got rid of the bike at the end of each season thing. Whereas this one, it's currently in the shop, which is the reason why I don't have it here with me, unfortunately. And it's the first time that it's needed any major upgrades in 3 years. So huge difference on that front. But definitely the outlay is quite a bit more. If you're looking for a bike with a belt drive, The cheapest one that I know of that's decent quality is Priority Cycles, and that's also in about the $2,500 to $3,000 range. So if for the bikes that are designed for winter and low maintenance, there's definitely an increased cost up front. But there, as I said, there's tons of other ways to not have to spend that much money. You just have to do a little bit more maintenance or understand there's going to be a little bit more rustage.
So you might want to explain what a belt drive is.
Belt drive, is that also your question? No. Belt drives are, I don't have a good picture of one in this, unfortunately. I have a good picture of a bike that has one, but you can't see the belt drive. So they're fairly new technology. It's made of sort of a carbon fiber, and it looks almost like a rubber instead of a chain. And it means that they don't rust. They last about 3 to 5 years before you have to replace them. But there's no rusting, there's no stretching, there's no need to lubricate it at all. And they're starting to come more frequently on e-bikes because it's just such a lower maintenance component. Really, really handy, especially if you're wanting to ride it through the winter.
Yeah, I was just saying, Michelle did put a link to the employee purchase loan program in the chat for this Teams meeting, so you can go back and find that. But there's also a question, somebody's wondering, do you have a closer photo of the inner gears? I think they're referring to this bike that you were showing.
Internal gears, yeah, that is the right bike. I don't have a good photo. Oh, here's actually a good photo. So the one of me, if you look in sort of the rear wheel, bottom back corner, it looks like it's a single geared bike, essentially. That's what it looks like from the outside. I have no idea how it works on the inside, but I promise you there are 8 gears on this bike. Somehow something on the internal hub moves and adjusts the resistance. I don't know. It's magic, but it makes it look like a single speed gear from the outside. Yeah, which actually single speed bikes are really useful in the winter, again, because you can cover them with a chain guard. Much easier to clean, much easier to oil, cheaper than an internal gear. So a lot of people rely on single speed or fixies in the winter. That's a really great option as well, unless you have hills, which I do, or unless you're carrying children, which I do. So if it's going to be the right option for you, then that's a fabulous option for the winter. But unfortunately, it's just not the one that I can consider. And then the middle photo here is the bike that has the belt drive. And again, it's just not a great photo that you can really see what it looks like. But again, they look like they're a single speed bike, but instead of having a shiny chain on it, it has like a rubber looking belt drive, like a belt drive that you put in your car. Like it truly does resemble that very, very closely. And they're fabulous for winter. Right.
I don't have any more questions. So thank you so much, Felicity, for coming out. And yeah, such a great presentation. And I think last time you had sent a list with resources.
I can certainly send that again.
Okay.